The first words out of Karen's mouth that morning made my blood run cold. She stood in the middle of my front yard, her bulk framed against the rising sun. Clipboard clutched to her chest like a holy relic, shouting at two bewildered deputies she had dragged onto my property. "If he resists," she barked, "shoot him. That's the only way to deal with these lawbreakers." Her voice was sharp, commanding, dripping with a sense of power she had manufactured out of thin air. The deputies exchanged glances, visibly uncomfortable, their hands hovering near their holsters but clearly reluctant to follow her outrageous command. Still, the words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. My neighbors gasped from their porches, whispering in disbelief. But no one moved to stop her. Fear had always been her weapon of choice, and today she wielded it like a gun. I stepped out onto my porch, shovel in hand, not as a weapon, but as a statement. My voice carried across the yard, steady though my chest burned with rage. "Karen, this is private property. You have no authority here. No HOA rule. No fake ordinance. Nothing you write on that clipboard changes the deed in my name." She sneered, lips curling into a cruel smile. "You can waive your paperwork all you want, but I have the police. You will comply, or you'll be dragged off this land." She turned toward the deputies again, jabbing her finger at me. "Arrest him. And if he resists, shoot." The silence that followed was suffocating. The deputies shifted uneasily but didn't move forward. One cleared his throat. "Ma'am, that's not how this works." "We don't," but Karen cut him off, screeching, "Do your job. The HOA orders are law." She was trembling now, not with fear, but with fury, drunk on the sound of her own voice. I knew this was the moment. If I stayed quiet, if I let her lies stand, my neighbors would go on living under her reign of terror. But if I struck back not with fists or rage, but with truth, I could end this. I walked calmly into the yard, pressing the shovel into the dirt. Each clump of earth I turned felt like striking a blow against her arrogance. Karen shouted at me to stop, shrieking that I was defiling community property. But I ignored her. The crowd grew, neighbors leaving their porches to see what I was doing. With each thrust of the shovel, something began to emerge: old wooden stakes, faded survey markers buried deep beneath the soil, driven into the ground decades earlier. I pulled them up, one by one, holding them high so everyone could see. Each marker bore the same set of coordinates and initials, proof of the original boundary lines of my land, stamped and recorded by the county long before Karen's HOA ever existed. The deputies leaned in, their eyes scanning the weathered wood and rusted tags nailed to the top. One of them muttered, "This is official survey work. This isn't HOA property at all." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as realization spread. Karen's empire wasn't built on authority. It was built on lies, on false maps, on intimidation. She paled, her mouth opening and closing as she tried to form words. "That's old junk. It doesn't mean anything. The HOA maps are current." But her voice cracked, betraying her panic. That's when the twist arrived. From the back of the crowd, an older man stepped forward, his gait slow but steady, a rolled-up tube of documents in his arms. It was Mr. Harris, a retired county surveyor who had lived quietly on the edge of town for years. He unrolled the papers on the hood of a deputy's car, revealing official county maps, each stamped with his signature. "I did the survey on this land 30 years ago," he said, his voice gravelly but strong. "This property was never annexed into any HOA. I told your developers that when they tried to file false plats, they ignored me. But the records don't lie. His finger tapped the inked boundaries on the map, lines that matched perfectly with the stakes I had unearthed. The crowd erupted, voices rising in outrage. She's been lying to us. One neighbor shouted. Another cried. She fined me thousands for a fence that wasn't even under her control. The deputies turned toward Karen, their expressions no longer hesitant but sharp, authoritative. One said firmly, "Ma'am, you've overstepped. You have no jurisdiction here. Ordering us to use deadly force was unlawful and reckless. You'll be answering for this." Karen's face twisted into something grotesque. Caught between fury and terror, she tried one last desperate act, lunging for the clipboard, waving it like a weapon. "I am the HOA president. My word is law." But the deputies stepped forward, one of them pulling the clipboard from her grasp, the other snapping a citation into her hand so hard it made her flinch. The crowd roared with approval, phones raised to capture every second of her humiliation. I planted the shovel in the ground, standing tall, my voice carrying over the cheers. This is the truth she tried to bury. You've lived under fear for too long. But today the lies are over. This land answers to the law, not to her clipboard. Karen's shriek turned into a guttural wail, her whole body trembling as the deputies closed in on her. She swung her arms wildly, screeching that the entire neighborhood would collapse without her control, that property values would vanish, that chaos would reign. But no one moved to defend her. Neighbors who had once cowered under her threats now shouted back with raw anger. One man yelled, "The only chaos here was you, Karen." Another woman, tears streaking her face, cried, "You made me sell my dog because of your rules, and it wasn't even your land." Their voices built into a chorus, louder than Karen's hysteria, drowning her out until her words became nothing more than pitiful echoes. The deputies didn't hesitate any longer. They seized her clipboard, tossed it onto the hood of the cruiser, and snapped handcuffs around her wrists. The moment the metallic click rang out, the crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, laughter, all of it pouring out like water breaking through a dam. Phones captured every angle as the queen of petty tyranny, the woman who once boasted she could order police to shoot her resistors, was shoved into the back seat of a patrol car like any other criminal. She kicked. She screamed. She spat. But it didn't matter anymore. Her empire of fear was gone. Then the final twist came. Mr. Harris, the retired surveyor, handed his official maps to the deputies. They radioed into dispatch, and within minutes the county commissioner himself arrived. He stood tall in his tailored jacket, scanning the chaos with weary eyes before addressing the crowd. "We've reviewed these documents. It's true, this land, and much of what Karen claimed as HOA property, was never legally annexed. The fines, the threats, the so-called rules, all fraudulent. Effective immediately. This HOA is dissolved pending full investigation." Gasps and cheers mingled in the air. Years of fear melted into relief, into vindication, into long-suppressed joy. Karen heard it all through the cruiser's window, her face pressed against the glass in horror. She had dreamed of control, of building a legacy on the backs of terrified neighbors. Instead, her name would be carved into history as the woman who lied, bullied, and fell apart when the truth was unearthed literally. The days that followed were like a sunrise after years of storm. Neighbors tore down the HOA's posted signs, burning the bogus rulebooks in a bonfire that lit the night sky. Families once divided by Karen's fines shared meals together. Gardens bloomed without threat of citation. Children chalked bright murals on sidewalks where once they had been scolded for defacing property. The neighborhood was alive again, not ruled by fear, but by trust. I rebuilt the patch of yard I had dug up, leaving one of the old survey stakes in place, sealed beneath glass, as a reminder of what truth looks like when it's uncovered. People came by to see it, touching the worn wood as if it were a monument. In a way, it was. It marked the line between lies and justice, between Karen's rule and the community's rebirth. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the lake shimmered gold, Mr. Harris joined me on the porch. He looked out over the yards alive with laughter and said softly, "Funny thing about the truth, it doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It just waits, buried, until someone digs it up. And when it does, nothing can stop it." His words carried a weight I'll never forget. Karen's story became a cautionary tale. Her name whispered in grocery store aisles. Her downfall shared online by millions. She thought she could command the law, even death, with a clipboard. Instead, she ended up a prisoner of her own arrogance. And now I ask you, if you had been standing in that yard, watching me dig through the soil to expose the lies, would you have stayed silent? Or would you have raised your voice too? Was Karen's collapse the justice she deserved? Or do you see it differently? Share your thoughts, because silence lets fear win. But truth only triumphs when voices rise.